Check this out. This is a tornado drill in an American school in 1947. The kids in this particular school happened to be in Indiana, but crouching in the hallway and covering your head and hoping for the best, that was the state-of-the-art response to tornadoes just about everywhere in our country in 1947. It is still the state-of-the-art in 2013. On hearing the news that a tornado is coming, American school kids in most places that get these kind of storms, they're still sent into the hallways to crouch and cover their heads. Get as far inside the building as you can. Stay away from big open areas like the gym or the cafeteria. Get low to the ground. Maybe pray. I'm not making light of this advice and this kind of plan. It really is better than nothing. And it really is the best you could do in a lot of places if and when a tornado is bearing down. Drop and tuck or duck and cover. That was the plan 60 years ago. It is still the plan now in much of the country. Last month in Moore, Oklahoma, an EF5 tornado struck 2 elementary schools. It had winds in excess of 200 miles an hour. That tornado was a mile wide, and those kids at those schools pretty much had nowhere to go, so they went into the hallways, like school kids have done for generations. The kids in Moore took shelter in hallways and bathrooms, ducking and covering, and at one of the 2 elementary schools, at Briarwood Elementary, all the kids lived. At the other elementary school, though, 7 kids died. The official cause of death for each of them was asphyxia. They were smothered in the collapse of their building as they sheltered in the hallway. Neither of these elementary schools had a storm shelter underground or a fortified safe room above ground. When the tornado struck, these kids really just had nowhere safe to hide. They did survive in the school where the hallways didn't all collapse, but they did not survive in the school that was harder hit. When people talk about safe rooms, it almost sounds like a metaphor, but it is a really specific thing for storm survival. It's a structure, a room like this, a concrete reinforced above ground bunker. Scientists at the National Wind Institute at Texas Tech University have been testing these rooms out. They fired debris at them at really high speeds, simulating the effects of a real tornado and the kind of debris that flies at those kind of speeds. After the deadly tornado last month in Moore, Oklahoma, the one that killed 7 kids at that school and 23 people in all, after that storm, those same scientists went out and examined what happened to the safe rooms that were in that community in the path of that tornado. Turns out they all held. It turns out that if you had somewhere to go, if you had a safe room to take shelter in from that EF5 tornado that hit Moore, Oklahoma, then that safe room really did protect you. They found 16 of them, these specially built, specially reinforced safe rooms that were in the path of destruction in Moore. The scientist from Texas Tech who investigated how they all fared in the storm said, quote, "They all performed great." The Oklahoma newspaper reports that in some cases, the safe rooms were the only part of a house that made it through that tornado. But they made it. They worked. After that devastating tornado in Moore, a state lawmaker down the road in Rush Springs, Oklahoma, decided to do something about safe rooms. Lawmaker Joe Dorman has been trying to pass laws about storm safety in Oklahoma for a few years now. But he is a Democrat, and the Oklahoma legislature is controlled by Republicans. So far, they have voted down everything he tried. After the Moore tornado 2 weeks ago, he thought maybe now he could get a bill passed. Joe Dorman proposed that the state spend about $500 million to build more safe rooms for schools and also for homes. That new bill, after the Moore tornado, for more safe rooms that had saved lives in that tornado, that might have saved those school kids who died, that bill, like all his others, went nowhere in the Oklahoma State Legislature. But then it happened again. Another huge storm went barreling through Oklahoma. One giant tornado struck El Reno, Oklahoma, which, like Moore, Oklahoma, is a suburb of Oklahoma City. We learned today that that tornado on Friday in El Reno was also an EF5. And while everybody was astonished by the size of that mile-wide tornado that hit Moore, the one in El Reno, that was more than 2.5 miles wide. This is the widest tornado on record ever. So wide that observers had trouble figuring out exactly where it was because it seemed like it was everywhere. Students at a vocational school in the path of that huge storm on Friday managed to get underground before that funnel cloud destroyed their building. Now the superintendent of that school says that any rebuilding he does is going to include some kind of safe room. Quote, "When you see the devastation and you see the end result, it clears up for you pretty quick." The death toll so far from that tornado outbreak on Friday is 18 people dead. But everybody at that Voc Tech school that took a direct hit lived because they had an underground shelter to get to. With back-to-back tragedies like these in her state, Republican Governor Mary Fallin says Oklahoma must have a very vigorous discussion about providing safe places for schools, about what the state can do, she says, quote, within budgetary means. Budgetary means, of course, depend largely on the decisions of the elected officials of Oklahoma, who, after all, pass a budget and set taxes to pay for it and sign those budgetary means into law. Can the elected officials of Oklahoma muster the political will to spend money on something like this? I mean, nobody likes spending, but tornado shelters in school buildings that work, that have been proven to work again and again and again, can we do that? Oklahoma's elected officials do not seem to think so. After the tornado in Moore, a bipartisan group of lawmakers decided that instead of legislating anything, they would form a nonprofit called Shelter Oklahoma Schools to try to raise private money for safe rooms. The kids at Plaza Towers did not have to perish, one of the corporate donors wrote. We cannot wait for our government to fix this. But can't the government fix this? Why should kids at any school in Oklahoma have to hope for a corporate bailout that might make their school safer instead of the schools just being safer by virtue of the fact that they are Oklahoma schools and Oklahoma takes responsibility for keeping them safe? Well, Joe Dorman, the same state lawmaker who's tried for years now to get something done on storm safety, who tried again just last month. Now he says he plans to try to go around the legislature. He plans to try to gather signatures for a citizens' initiative in Oklahoma. He plans to put this policy question about storm shelters directly to the people, because he says he believes that they will do and that they can do what the legislature will not and apparently cannot. Joining us now is Joe Dorman. He's a state representative from Oklahoma. He hopes to put his proposal to establish a $500 million bond for building safe rooms in front of the voters in November 2014. Mr. Dorman, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Good evening, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
You know this issue a lot better than I do. I feel like I'm learning a lot of it day by day. Did I say anything that was screwy there about this policy idea that you have and how these shelters have performed in the past?
No, you're on target. The shelters have been proven to provide that safe mechanism for people to have a place to go during a tornado. And while none of them are 100% safe, it greatly increases the odds of your survival in a storm like what we saw in Moore and in El Reno.
Well, Oklahoma is in the heart of tornado country. Obviously, this has just been a tremendously difficult year, but a lot of other years have been difficult too. There's clear examples over many years of people using shelters and safe rooms to survive otherwise not survivable storms. What is it about the legislature that has caused them to turn back new laws about storm safety, given how much it's been proven over and over again in the state?
I started this fight a few years ago when one of my constituents died. She was in a mobile home park. She left her mobile home to go to a building on the area where the trailers were at. It was locked, so on her way back to her trailer, she was crushed by another trailer. And after that, we worked to try and get shelters in mobile home parks and apartment complexes and met stiff opposition through the legislature.
Why are they opposed? Is it just a general idea that the state law, state regulation shouldn't be telling private citizens what to do?
That's part of it. The industry was opposed to any mandate that would force the parks or apartment complexes to build shelters. And Oklahomans have a tendency to buck up any time you do say you have to do something. So oftentimes when we're looking at legislation like this, we have to offer the carrot rather than the stick and provide incentives. And it's unfortunate. A lot of times when people are shopping, they'd rather have a swimming pool than a storm shelter. In Oklahoma, that's definitely not the safe way to go.
Why do you think that Oklahoma voters might be more likely to support this idea if you put it to them directly when the lawmakers they have elected have not supported it?
It's just like a school bond issue, and in Oklahoma we actually have a 60% requirement to pass a school bond issue. And when the citizens see something like that and they know it's going for the kids, oftentimes they will turn out a 60% vote in favor of something like that. Now this constitutional amendment, this change would only require 50% vote of the people, and with the outcry of what I've heard from Democrats and Republicans alike around the state, people are willing to look at something, even if it means raising their taxes, to provide that for the schools and protect our kids.
If you do get enough signatures, if you get this on the ballot, do you expect opposition? Where do you think the opposition would come from?
I think there will be some opposition from individuals who just feel like they're taxed enough already. We see some elements of the Tea Party that would fight any type of tax increase. The Grover Norquist crowd, they're very prominent in Oklahoma and continue to fight any effort to raise revenue. But I think this crosses the line there. I think you're going to see a lot of registered Republicans join with a lot of the Democrats and support something like this, knowing that it is going for the common good.
Joe Dorman, Oklahoma State Representative. It's been interesting to follow your efforts on this from afar, as all of us in the country are trying to learn more about how your state copes with this kind of threat. Thanks for helping us understand it tonight. I really appreciate your time.
Well, you've got a lot of fans here in Oklahoma. Thank you for everything you do and reporting.
Thanks for saying so. I really appreciate it. All right, still to come. Young guns. They get old too. Then what happens? It's coming up.